Everyone calls Montana Big Sky Country and then only goes to Glacier. And look, Glacier National Park is one of the most extraordinary places on this planet, and it absolutely belongs on this list. But Montana is the fourth largest state in the country. It shares a border with Canada for 545 miles. It has more grizzly bears than any other state in the lower 48. It has the largest intact temperate ecosystem in the world. It has hot springs and ghost towns and a stretch of the Missouri River where Lewis and Clark described landscapes so beautiful they did not believe they were real. The version of Montana that most people visit is a fraction of what is actually here. I have been through this state corner to corner. Glacier, the Beartooths, the Missouri Breaks, the Bitterroot, the Flathead, the Highline, and I built the list. 20 places in Montana that will completely rewire what you thought this state was. Let's get into it. Number 1. Glacier National Park, Flathead County. You already know the name. You do not yet know what it actually does to you when you are inside it. Going to the Sun Road, 50 miles of road, crossing the Continental Divide through the heart of the park at Logan Pass, is one of the greatest drives in the world. Not in the United States, in the world. The engineering alone is extraordinary. Blasted directly into the cliff face of the Garden Wall, with the west side climbing through old-growth cedar and hemlock, and the east side dropping through alpine tundra above valleys so deep and wide the glaciers carved them. Look like someone scooped the rock out with a spoon. Grinnell Glacier is the signature hike. 11 miles round trip to the remnant glacier in its cirque. And the trail passes Grinnell Lake, Upper Grinnell Lake, and the waterfall above it in a sequence that gets more extraordinary with every mile. The park is losing its glaciers. When it was designated in 1910, it had 150 named glaciers, and now has 26. And that fact makes every visit feel like both a privilege and a responsibility. Go now. Go while the ice is still there. Number 2, the Beartooth Highway, Carbon County. The most beautiful road in America. That is the designation the late Charles Kuralt gave it, and nobody who has driven it has argued with him. The Beartooth Highway climbs from Red Lodge, Montana, to the northeast entrance of Yellowstone through 69 miles of switchbacks and high-altitude plateau that put you at 10,947 feet on the Beartooth Plateau, where the road, a treeless tundra above the clouds, and the views extend to the Absaroka Range, the Beartooth Mountains, and on clear days far into Wyoming. The switchbacks above Red Lodge are visible from the valley below. The road cutting back and forth up the cliff face like a white scar on the mountain, and driving them gives you views of the valley that make it physically difficult to keep your eyes on the road. The plateau at the top is so flat and so high that it feels like driving on the surface of another planet. Snow closes this road from October through May, and in the first weeks after it opens in late May, there are walls of plowed snow 20 feet high on both sides. Drive it as early in the season as you can. Number 3, the Bob Marshall Wilderness, Lewis and Clark and Teton counties. The Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex. The Bob, as everyone calls it, is one of the largest roadless wilderness areas in the lower 48 United States. Over 1 million acres of Rocky Mountain wilderness with no roads, no motors, and no development of any kind. Grizzly bears, wolves, mountain lions, wolverines, lynx. The Chinese Wall, a 22-mile-long limestone escarpment rising 1,000 feet from the wilderness floor along the Continental Divide, is one of the finest geological features in Montana, and it can only be reached on foot or horseback. Most people who go into the Bob go with outfitters running pack horse trips, which is how Montana has accessed the backcountry for 150 years, and which is still the most efficient way to move through a wilderness this size. The South Fork of the Flathead River, running through the center of the complex, is the finest cutthroat trout fishing in Montana. This is wilderness at the scale and the integrity that almost no other landscape in the lower 48 can match. Number 4, Flathead Lake, Lake County. The largest natural freshwater lake west of the Mississippi is in northwestern Montana, and it is extraordinary. Flathead Lake is 28 miles long, 15 miles wide, and 370 feet deep, and the water is clear enough to see the bottom at 80 feet. The Mission Mountains rise directly from the eastern shore, 9,000-foot peaks with glaciers visible from the lake surface, and the Salish and Kootenai tribal lands on the western shore have wild horse herds and cherry orchards that produce some of the best cherries in the country in July. Wild Horse Island State Park in the center of the lake is accessible only by boat and has a herd of bighorn sheep, mule deer, and bald eagles that use the island year-round. The drive along the eastern shore of the lake on US 93, with the Mission Mountains above and the lake below, is one of the finest lake drives in the American West. If you are watching this and you have not subscribed, do it right now. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, and leave a comment below telling me which state you want this series to cover next. Every single comment and every like pushes this video to more people who want exactly this kind of content. Hit the bell. Let's keep going. Number 5. The Missouri River Breaks and the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument, Chouteau County. In 1805, Meriwether Lewis wrote in his journal that the landscape along the Missouri River in north-central Montana was so extraordinary, so full of color and geological spectacle, that he and his men could not believe it was real. 220 years later, the White Cliffs section of the Missouri River Breaks looks exactly as Lewis described it. White sandstone formations rising from the river bluffs, badlands of eroded shale in tan and gray and rust, prairies stretching back from the river to the horizon with no development visible in any direction. The 149-mile free float from Coal Banks Landing to Judith Landing is one of the finest multi-day canoe trips in the country. A river journey through a landscape that has been almost completely unchanged since the Era of Discovery passed through it, and it is done by relatively few people each summer, which means you have the river essentially to yourself. This is Lewis and Clark country in its most literal and most intact form. Number 6. The Beartooth Mountains and the Stillwater Complex, Stillwater County. Beartooth Mountains are the highest range in Montana, over 20 peaks above 12,000 feet. And the Stillwater Complex at the base is one of the most geologically significant formations on the continent. But what most people do not know is the hiking. The East Rosebud Trail from the trailhead at East Rosebud Lake climbs through one of the finest sequences of alpine scenery in Montana. Lake after lake, connected by a trail that gains 3,500 feet over 14 miles to the Beartooth Plateau, and it is consistently described by Montana hikers as one of the finest trails in the state. Elk Lake, Rimrock Lake, and finally the Plateau give you the Beartooths from the inside rather than from the road, and the inside is where this range truly operates. Number 7. Bozeman and the Gallatin Canyon, Gallatin County. Bozeman is the fastest growing city in Montana, and it is easy to see why. A university town with serious outdoor culture, excellent restaurants, a genuinely walkable downtown, and the Gallatin Canyon 20 minutes south, giving you some of the finest whitewater, hiking, and fly fishing in the state. The Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman has the largest collection of dinosaur fossils in the United States. Jack Horner, the paleontologist who inspired the character of Alan Grant in Jurassic Park, built this collection here, and the exhibits are extraordinary even for people who are not particularly interested in paleontology until they stand in front of a Tyrannosaurus skull the size of a dining table. The Gallatin River below Big Sky is blue ribbon trout water, and the canyon walls above it are granite, and the entire corridor is the specific Montana that most people picture when they picture Montana. Number 8. The Bitterroot Valley, Ravalli County. The Bitterroot Valley runs 100 miles south from Missoula between the Bitterroot Range on the west and the Sapphire Mountains on the east, and it is one of the finest valley landscapes in Montana. The Bitterroot Mountains on the western wall of the valley are 10,000-foot peaks with trails into a wilderness where the Lewis and Clark expedition crossed the Continental Divide through Lolo Pass in September 1805. The Sula Basin at the southern end of the valley is where Lewis and Clark camped with the Salish people, and the meadows there look as they did then. Open grassland, the river winding through, the mountains above. The valley towns of Hamilton and Stevensville are small and unassuming, and the farm stands along US 93 in summer and fall have produce that makes the drive worth taking at any time. Number 9, Makoshika State Park, Dawson County. In the Badlands of eastern Montana, where most people assume there is nothing, is the largest state park in Montana and one of the finest badland landscapes in the American West. Makoshika, a Lakota word meaning bad land or land of bad spirits, is 11,000 acres of eroded sedimentary rock in the Hell Creek Formation, the same geological layer that contains the most significant Cretaceous dinosaur fossils in the world. Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus bones have been pulled from the rock here. The caprock formations, flat-topped tables of harder rock sitting on eroded pedestals above the valley floor, turn orange and red at sunset, and the drive through the park in late afternoon light produces images that look nothing like Montana in most people's imagination, and exactly like Montana in its geological reality. Number 10, Missoula and the Clark Fork River, Missoula County. Missoula is the most culturally alive small city in Montana, a university town with a serious literary tradition, a music scene that punches above its weight, independent bookstores that have been on the same street for 40 years, and the Clark Fork River running through the center of it with a riverside trail that the university to the downtown to Caras Park, where summer concerts happen on the riverbank. The Rattlesnake Wilderness begins 3 miles from downtown and gives you 33,000 acres of roadless wilderness accessible by bicycle from the city center. Norman McLean set A River Runs through it in the Blackfoot River Valley east of Missoula, and the Blackfoot, recovered from decades of mining pollution through one of the most successful river restoration projects in the country, is now one of the finest fly fishing rivers in Montana. You fish a river that a literary classic was written about, and the landscape it describes is still exactly there. You are 10 places deep, and you are still watching. Subscribe right now, hit the like button, and drop a comment below telling me which of these 10 places surprised you most. I read every single comment. Hit that bell, because the second half of this list is where Montana starts showing you the things that even Montanans have not fully explored. Let's finish this. Number 11, the National Bison Range, Lake County. On the Flathead Indian Reservation south of Flathead Lake, a herd of 300 to 500 American bison lives on 18,766 of native grassland. One of the original conservation efforts in the United States, established in 1908, when the bison population had been reduced from 30 million animals to fewer than 1,000. The 19-mile Red Sleep Mountain Drive through the refuge is one of the finest wildlife drives in the American West. Bison grazing on hillsides above you, pronghorn antelope in the open grassland, white-tailed and mule deer in the creek bottoms, golden and bald eagles on every fence post. The Mission Mountains are directly behind the refuge, and on a clear morning, the combination of the bison herd and the 9,000-foot peaks behind them is one of the most iconic landscapes in Montana. Number 12, the Pryor R Mountains Wild Horse Range, Carbon County. The most accessible wild horse viewing in the American West is in the Pryor Mountains south of Billings, where a herd of about 150 horses has lived on federal land since before European settlement. Descended from Spanish horses brought north centuries ago, and genetically distinct from any domestic breed. The horses are concentrated in the lower elevations in spring and fall and dispersed into the mountains in summer, and the dirt roads through the Bureau of Land Management range are accessible to high-clearance vehicles. You drive slowly, and the horses appear. Stallions with their bands, foals learning the terrain, old mares that have navigated this range for 20 years. No fences, no handlers, just horses in a landscape they have occupied for centuries. Number 13, the Gates of the Mountains, Lewis and Clark County. When Meriwether Lewis reached the section of the Missouri River Canyon north of Helena on July 19, 1805, he wrote that the cliffs on both sides rose 200 feet perpendicular from the water, and that, as the boat moved through, the walls appeared to close behind them and open ahead, as if gates of rock were moving around the vessel. The Gates of the Mountains boat tour from the marina north of Helena takes you through the same canyon on the same river. And the walls Lewis described are still there, still rising 1,200 feet of white limestone on both sides, with mountain goats on the ledges above and osprey nesting on the spires. The canyon is accessible only by boat. And the 36-mile round trip gives you 4 hours on the Missouri River in a canyon that has not changed since the Corps of Discovery passed through it and was moved enough by what they saw to write it down. Number 14. Bannack State Park, Beaverhead County. Montana's first territorial capital and the most authentically preserved ghost town in the state. 60 structures standing in a creek valley in the southwestern corner of Montana, exactly as they were left when the last residents departed in the 1970s. Bannack was founded in 1862 when gold was discovered in Grasshopper Creek, and at its peak had 3,000 residents and a murder rate produced by a Sheriff Henry Plummer, who was secretly the leader of a gang of road agents that robbed and killed over 100 people before vigilantes hanged him in 1864. The hotel, the courthouse, the Masonic Lodge, the school, all standing, all furnished, all in the state of arrested decay that makes Bannack feel inhabited rather than empty. Bannack Days in July, when costumed interpreters bring the town back to life for a weekend, is one of the finest living history events in Montana. Number 15, the Judith Basin and the Charlie Russell Country, Judith Basin County. The central Montana prairie around the Judith Basin is where Charles Russell, the cowboy artist who became the finest painter of the American West, worked as a night wrangler and produced the watercolors and sketches that became his early career. The CM, Russell Museum in Great Falls, is the finest collection of his work in the world, but the landscape he painted, the Judith Basin, the Missouri Breaks, the cattle ranges below the Highwood and Little Belt Mountains, is still recognizable in his paintings from a century ago. Russell's studio in Great Falls is preserved exactly as he left it, with his paint-stained work table and the salt collection he used as models. Great Falls itself, on the Missouri River, where Lewis and Clark spent a month portaging the 5 Great Falls of the Missouri, has a Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center that is one of the finest expedition museums in the country. Number 16, the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness, Park County. The wilderness that begins where Yellowstone ends, 943,000 acres of roadless mountain landscape between Livingston and Red Lodge on the Montana side of the Wyoming border. The Stillwater River drainage on the north side of the Beartooths gives you wilderness access without the permit pressure of the Wyoming Park. And the trail up the Stillwater to Sioux Charlie Lake and the Upper Basin is one of the finest moderate backpacking routes in Montana. Mountain goats on the ridges, cutthroat trout in every creek. The froze-to-death plateau, named for exactly what you would expect, at 11,000 feet, gives you the high Beartooths from the inside, and the view from the plateau rim of the Stillwater Valley 3,000 feet below is one of the great wilderness panoramas in the American West. Number 17, the Kootenai Falls and the Kootenai River, Lincoln County. The largest undammed waterfall in Montana is in the far northwestern corner of the state, 12 miles west of Libby, and the short trail to the falls gives you a first view of the Kootenai River dropping through a basalt gorge in a series of cascades that total over 90 feet. A swinging footbridge over the gorge below the falls gives you a view straight down into the rapid at the bottom of the drop, and the spray from the falls reaches the bridge on days when the river is running high. The Kootenai River corridor above the falls through the Kootenai National Forest is one of the finest float fishing rivers in western Montana. Class 1 and 2 water with cutthroat and bull trout visible in the clear pools, and the old-growth cedar forest along the lower river near Troy. is the westernmost extension of the inland cedar ecosystem in Montana. Number 18. The Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, Bighorn County. On June 25, 1876, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led 210 men of the 7th Cavalry into battle against a combined force of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors and was annihilated in 45 minutes. Every man in Custer's immediate command died on the ridge above the Little Bighorn River. The battlefield is preserved exactly as it was left. The stone markers where each soldier fell are still there, white against the brown grass of the Montana hillside. And the interpretation at this monument has changed dramatically in recent decades to tell the story from both sides. The Indian Memorial, dedicated in 2003, honors the warriors who fought and won here. And the combination of the two memorials on the same ridge where it happened gives you the most complete reckoning with this history available anywhere. This is not a comfortable sight, it is an honest one. Number 19. The wild and scenic Blackfoot River, Missoula County. The river that Norman Maclean fished with his father and his brother and wrote into American literature. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it, was, by the 1980s, one of the most degraded rivers in Montana. Mining, logging, and overgrazing had eliminated most of the native bull trout and the cutthroat. Then the Blackfoot Challenge, a coalition of ranchers, tribes, conservationists, and government agencies, spent 30 years removing barriers, restoring riparian corridors, and buying conservation easements, and the river recovered. The native trout are back. The river runs clear through a valley of restored native grassland with the Mission Mountains visible to the north. Fishing the Blackfoot now in the landscape Maclean described is one of the most layered outdoor experiences available in Montana. The fishing, the literature, the recovery, all in the same river on the same morning. Number 20. The Beartooth Plateau at first light, and you stayed. You end this list exactly where Montana always leads you, not the viewpoint from the car window, the one you earned. You drove to the top of the World Rest Area the evening before, and you set your alarm for 4:30. You were on the plateau before the sky was light, sitting on tundra at nearly 11,000 feet, with the wind coming off the Beartooth Mountains, and the temperature 30 degrees below what it was in Red Lodge an hour below. And the sky went from black to deep indigo to the first thin gold above Wyoming to the east. And then the light came across the plateau, and the snowfields above you caught it and went from gray to white to gold to the specific color of high-altitude alpenglow that no photograph has ever accurately reproduced. And the entire Beartooth Range was in front of you, and the Absarokas were behind you, and the plateau was empty in every direction except you and the sky. And in that moment, cold, awake, completely present, you understood what people mean when they say Montana changes you. It does not change you. It reminds you of something you already knew and had forgotten. That is what this state does. And now you know exactly where to go. Here is your assignment. 3 places. Write them in the comments right now. Not the whole list. 3, the ones you are actually going to do first. That comment is a public commitment, and the research on this is clear. You are significantly more likely to follow through when you write it down where other people can see it. And when you have done your 3, come back and tell me which one surprised you. I want to know if the Beartooth Highway was everything. I want to know if the wild horses showed up in the Pryors. I want to know if the gates of the mountains made you understand what Lewis felt when he wrote about it. These are the stories worth having. If you made it to the end of this video, this channel was built for you. Subscribe right now, smash that like button, drop your 3 picks in the comments, and hit the bell so you do not miss what is coming next. Go watch the next video right here, which covers the 30 best places in Alaska. Because Alaska is the state that everyone puts on their bucket list, and almost nobody actually goes to. And the reality of what is there is so far beyond what most people imagine that this might be the most important video in this entire series. I will see you there.